He announced he was leaving for a week of business. But he never left. Instead, Don William, the man who had built an empire on fear, loyalty, and silence, disguised himself in plain black clothes, pulled a cap low over his cold eyes, and stayed hidden inside his own mansion. Not to protect it, but to watch it. To watch her. To see who Vera truly was, when she believed no one was looking. What he discovered about his fiancée shattered something inside him. But it was the quiet actions of a simple maid that did something no enemy, no rival, no betrayal had ever managed to do. It made Don William feel. You will not believe what happened inside that mansion.
If this story moved something in your chest, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe and hit the bell, because this is a story that will stay with you long after it ends.
The hidden corridor ran deep behind the east wing of the Castello, a narrow passage carved into the walls of the mansion that only William knew existed. A single chair, a single screen, cold silence. The pale glow of the security monitor carved shadows across the face of Don William. The man whose name alone was enough to empty a room, silence a crowd, or end a career overnight. He had built everything from nothing. At 19, he had nothing but hunger and nerve. At 35, he controlled half the city's underground and all of its fear. Nobody crossed Don William. Nobody lied to Don William. Or so he had believed. This was the chair where he had once tracked rivals, mapped betrayals, planned destructions so precise they looked like accidents. But tonight, the face on that screen was not an enemy. It was Vera, the woman who wore his ring. William leaned forward, his jaw tight, his dark eyes unblinking. He remembered what his mother, Elizabeth, had whispered to him 2 weeks earlier. Her frail hand had gripped his wrist with surprising strength for a woman so ill, and her eyes, tired but sharp, had searched his face before she spoke. William, watch how she treats me when you are not in the room. That is the only truth you will ever need. He had not wanted to believe it. He had pushed the doubt down. The way he had always pushed difficult things down, beneath duty, beneath discipline, beneath the cold surface the world knew as Don William. But the doubt had never left. It sat in his chest like a stone. Small, heavy, unmovable. And so, he had created the plan, announced the business trip, kissed Vera on the cheek at the door, watched his own car disappear through the gates from a second-floor window. Then he changed his clothes, pulled the cap low, and walked into the walls of his own home. Hidden, watching, waiting. On the main screen, he watched Vera stand at the front entrance, her face glowing with that familiar warmth he had fallen for 18 months ago. She waved until the gates closed completely. Her lips formed words he could not hear but knew by heart. Come back to me. I'll miss you. The gates shut, and in the space of a single breath, everything changed. The warmth drained from Vera's face like water poured from a glass. The smile, that perfect, practiced smile he had trusted without question, vanished completely. What replaced it was something William had never seen in all the months he had spent beside her. Something cold. Something calculated. Something that looked absolutely nothing like love. Vera's shoulders dropped. The soft elegance she always carried fell away like a costume being removed after a long performance. She rolled her neck slowly, exhaled with visible relief, and reached into the pocket of her dress. She dialed. William adjusted the audio feed with a steady hand. Her voice filled the narrow corridor, sharp, low, satisfied. He's gone. Finally. Come now. Not, my love. Not, William. Just. He. As though he were a door to unlock. A problem being managed. A piece on a board she had been playing long before he ever sat down at the table. A chill moved through William's chest that had nothing to do with the cold air of the corridor. But he did not move. In 17 years of building power from nothing, he had learned one rule above every other. Never react before you understand everything. He pressed his back against the chair, stared at the screen, and whispered, so quietly the walls barely heard. Show me who you really are, Vera. 20 minutes passed. William sat still as stone, his eyes never leaving the monitors. Then, a new movement on the screen. Not Vera. Someone else. The door to Elizabeth's room opened slowly, carefully, the way someone opens a door when they are trying not to disturb the person inside. A young woman in a simple maid's uniform stepped in. Dark hair tied back neatly. Quiet eyes. Unhurried movements. Stella. William watched as she crossed the room, set a small tray on the bedside table, and knelt beside his mother's bed without being asked. Her hands moved to Elizabeth's legs, pressing, circling, working slowly through the stiffness that the illness had left behind. Elizabeth stirred, opened her eyes, and when she saw Stella's face above her, something happened that tightened William's throat unexpectedly. His mother smiled. Not the weak, polite expression she wore for visitors. A real smile. Soft. Relieved. Safe. Stella said something low and gentle, and Elizabeth's hand reached up and rested on the young woman's arm. The way a mother holds a daughter, she trusts completely. William stared at the screen. He had walked past this girl 100 times in his own home, and had never once truly seen her. But now, in the blue-gray glow of a hidden monitor, watching a maid care for his mother in the silence of the night, he saw her. And something in the stone weight inside his chest shifted. Who are you? He thought. Who are you when no one is watching? He would find out. But first, there was Vera, and the knock on the front door that had just appeared on camera. A black car. Expensive. Familiar. William's eyes narrowed. He knew that car. He knew exactly who was inside it. And as his hand slowly closed into a fist on the arm of the chair, he realized his mother had been right all along. This was only the beginning. The black car sat at the gates for exactly 4 seconds before they opened. William had not touched the gate controls, which meant someone inside the mansion had. Someone who knew the visitor was coming. Someone who had been expecting him. William's eyes moved slowly across the monitors, scanning each room with the cold precision of a man who had spent 2 decades reading situations before other people even noticed something was wrong. He watched the car roll smoothly up the driveway, unhurried, comfortable, the movement of someone who had made this journey before. The engine cut. The door opened, and the man who stepped out made something go very quiet inside William's chest. Raphael Dawn. William knew that face the way he knew every face that had ever sat across a table from him in a room with no windows. Raphael was not a friend. He was not a business contact. He was not someone who belonged anywhere near this mansion, near this family, near anything William had built. Raphael Dawn was the financial architect of the Corsetti Syndicate, William's most dangerous rival. The man straightened his jacket, glanced toward the front door, and smiled. Not a nervous smile. Not the smile of someone doing something dangerous. The relaxed smile of someone arriving somewhere. He felt completely at home. William did not move. He simply watched. And in the silence of that narrow corridor, with nothing but the pale glow of the screen and the sound of his own controlled breathing, Don William understood that what his mother had tried to warn him about was far larger than he had imagined. This was not a woman with a wandering heart. This was a plan. Vera met Raphael at the door. There was no hesitation. No surprise. She stepped aside to let him in the way you let in someone you have been waiting for, and the moment the door closed behind them, everything about her changed again. The careful elegance she performed for the world dropped completely. She was sharper now. Direct. The softness gone entirely, replaced by something efficient and focused. The real Vera, William realized. Not the performance. The person underneath it. They moved into the sitting room. His sitting room, with the dark wood furniture and the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the garden his mother had planted 20 years ago. Raphael poured himself a drink from William's cabinet without asking. Vera sat across from him and crossed her legs. He left this morning, she said. We have the week. Raphael swirled the glass slowly. You're certain he suspects nothing? Vera's mouth curved. William trusts what he sees. And what he sees is exactly what I show him. Something moved through William's jaw. A tightening. Almost imperceptible. He pressed it down. The accounts, Raphael said, his tone shifting, businesslike now clipped. How close are you? 3 weeks after the wedding, Vera said. Once I'm his wife, I have access to everything. The offshore holdings, the property accounts, the emergency reserves. She paused. All of it. Raphael nodded slowly, satisfied in a way that made William's skin feel cold. And the old woman? Vera's expression did not change. She's already weak, she said flatly. Her condition does the work for me. I just need to make sure no one gets in the way of that. Silence. Raphael looked at her for a long moment. Then he raised his glass slightly, a small, ugly toast. 3 weeks, he said. 3 weeks, Vera echoed. In the corridor, William sat without moving. Not because he was calm, but because the kind of rage moving through him right now required complete stillness to contain. He had survived 17 years in the most dangerous world a man could inhabit. He had buried friends, outmaneuvered enemies, and made decisions in dark rooms that kept hundreds of people alive. He had never once lost control in a moment that required precision. He would not lose it now, but his hand, pressed flat against his thigh, was shaking, not from fear, from the specific devastation of being betrayed by someone you chose to trust. He thought about the ring he had placed on Vera's finger 6 months ago, the way she had cried, the way he had believed every tear. He exhaled slowly through his nose and pulled his focus back to the screen. Not yet, he told himself. You need everything. Every piece. He switched cameras. Down the hallway, inside Elizabeth's room, Stella was still there. She had moved from the bedside to the small table near the window, where she was quietly preparing Elizabeth's afternoon medication, sorting each pill carefully, checking the dosage the way someone checks it when they genuinely understand what happens if they get it wrong. Elizabeth was watching her from the bed. You don't have to stay, Elizabeth said softly. You've been here since morning. Stella looked up briefly. A small smile. I know. I'm serious, child. Go and rest. Stella set the last pill in the tray and carried it over carefully. After your medication, she said simply. Elizabeth studied her face for a moment. Do you know, the old woman said quietly, that in all the months you have been in this house, you are the only one who has ever said after instead of later. Stella did not seem to understand immediately. Elizabeth clarified, her voice low, tired, and completely honest. Later means maybe. After means you intend to stay. Stella looked at the woman in the bed and said nothing for a moment. Then she sat down on the edge of the chair beside the bed, picked up the glass of water, and held it steady as Elizabeth reached for it. Drink, Stella said gently. Then we can talk. William watched the exchange on the monitor. Every word had been picked up by the corridor's audio system. He sat with it for a long time after Elizabeth had taken her medication, and Stella had quietly dimmed the lamp beside the bed. He thought about what his mother had said. Later means maybe. After means you intend to stay. He thought about Vera saying, 3 weeks after the wedding, all of it. He thought about Raphael raising a glass in his sitting room. He thought about this girl, this quiet, unhurried girl, sorting pills alone at a window like it was the most important task in the world. And then something happened that William had not planned for. The door to Elizabeth's room opened. Vera walked in. Stella stood immediately, instinctively stepping slightly in front of the bed. A movement so small and so natural that William doubted she even realized she had done it. But he saw it. Vera's eyes moved to Stella, with the flat contempt of someone looking at something that does not matter. Leave us, she said. Stella did not move immediately. Her eyes went briefly to Elizabeth. Elizabeth gave the faintest nod. Stella lowered her head and walked to the door. But she did not go far. William watched her stop just outside, just beyond the frame of the camera, and stand there, still, listening, refusing, in her own quiet way, to fully leave. Inside the room, Vera approached the bed, and the expression on her face, now that she believed she was completely alone, was the most honest thing William had seen from her since the day they met. It was not cruelty exactly. It was colder than that. It was indifference. The kind that does not need to hate someone to hurt them, because it simply does not care. You look worse today, Vera said to Elizabeth, her voice stripped of every performance. Elizabeth looked up at her without fear. Vera, she said quietly, whatever you are planning, my son will see it. Vera tilted her head slowly, like someone considering an insect. Your son, she said, sees exactly what I want him to see. She reached toward the bedside table. Her hand moved toward the pill tray Stella had just prepared. And William, watching from the corridor, his fist closed so tightly his knuckles had gone white, whispered something into the dark. Not loud enough for any camera to catch. But his lips formed the words clearly. Don't you dare. Vera's hand hovered over the pill tray. 1 second. 2. Then, with a slowness that felt deliberate, almost theatrical, she picked up the entire tray, looked at it with the expression of someone inspecting something mildly inconvenient, and tipped it. The pills scattered across the floor in every direction. Small, white, helpless. Elizabeth flinched at the sound, that sharp, skittering clatter across cold stone, and then went very still, the way people go still when they have learned that reacting only makes things worse. Vera set the empty tray back on the table without a word. She looked down at the pills on the floor with mild satisfaction. The way someone looks at a problem they have just created on purpose to watch someone else suffer through solving it. Then she looked at Elizabeth. "You won't be needing those today," she said quietly. Elizabeth said nothing. Her hands, resting on the blanket, had tightened slightly, the only visible sign of what those words had done to her. In fact, Vera continued, moving slowly toward the window, her voice conversational now, almost pleasant. "I've been thinking about what happens after the wedding. William will be very busy, of course. Too busy to visit. And a house this size, with staff, with expenses." She turned slightly, glancing back over her shoulder. "It becomes difficult to justify certain arrangements." Elizabeth looked at her steadily. "You mean me," she said. Vera smiled. It did not reach her eyes. "I mean everything that no longer serves a purpose," she said simply. She straightened her dress, moved toward the door, and paused with her hand on the frame. "Enjoy the quiet," she said, "while it lasts." The door closed. In the corridor, William had not moved. His eyes were fixed on the screen with an intensity that had gone beyond anger into something far more dangerous. The cold, absolute clarity of a man who has seen enough and is now simply deciding how and when. He had built his empire on exactly this kind of moment. The moment after the emotion. When everything becomes arithmetic. He watched Elizabeth on the screen. She sat without moving for a long time after Vera left. Her hands still pressed flat on the blanket. Her jaw set. Her eyes dry, not because she wasn't hurting, but because she had decided long ago that certain people did not deserve her tears. Then the door opened again. Stella. She took one step into the room and stopped. Her eyes moved from Elizabeth's face, to the empty tray on the table, to the pills scattered across every corner of the floor. She did not gasp. She did not say a word. She simply crossed the room, lowered herself to her knees on the cold stone, and began picking them up, one by one. Each pill lifted carefully, examined, wiped gently against the hem of her uniform to clean it before being placed into her palm. Her movements were unhurried, methodical, completely focused, as though there were nothing in the world more important than this floor, these pills, this woman in the bed who needed them. William watched, and something happened to the arithmetic in his chest. It did not disappear, but something softer moved alongside it, something he did not have an immediate name for, because it had been a very long time since he had felt it. "You don't have to do that," Elizabeth said from the bed, her voice rough. Stella did not look up. "I know." "Stella." "Almost done," Stella said quietly. Elizabeth watched her for a moment. Then she exhaled, a long, slow release of breath that carried more than just air. "She'll punish you if she finds out," Elizabeth said. Stella sat back on her heels, looked at the pills collected in her palm, and counted them carefully. Satisfied, she rose to her feet, moved to the small table, and began placing them back in the tray in the correct order: morning dose, afternoon dose, evening, arranged with the same precision a pharmacist would use. "She punishes me anyway," Stella said simply. Elizabeth's eyes filled. Not with self-pity. With something older and more complicated. The specific grief of watching someone young absorb suffering without complaint because they have already decided it is the price of staying. "Come here," Elizabeth said. Stella carried the tray to the bedside and sat in the chair beside the bed. Elizabeth reached out and covered Stella's hand with her own, slowly, the way someone moves when their body no longer does exactly what they ask of it. "Why do you stay?" Elizabeth asked. Truly. Stella looked at the old woman's hand over hers. A pause. Long enough to be honest. "Because you remind me of someone," she said finally. Elizabeth waited. "My mother," Stella said, "before she got sick." She stopped. Started again more carefully. She had the same way of looking at people. like she could see past whatever they were showing her. Elizabeth tightened her hand slightly. What happened to her? She asked. Stella was quiet for a moment. She didn't have anyone to stay, she said. The room held that sentence for a long time. Then Stella straightened, picked up the glass of water from the table, and held it steadily toward Elizabeth. Your afternoon dose, she said softly. Elizabeth took it. In the corridor, William sat in the pale blue glow of the monitor and said nothing. He had heard every word through the audio feed. He thought about Stella's answer. She didn't have anyone to stay. He thought about the way Stella had knelt on that cold floor without hesitation, without calculation, without needing to be asked or watched or rewarded. He thought about Vera in this same room, 20 minutes earlier, tipping a pill tray with the casual cruelty of someone who had never once in their life needed anything from anyone weaker than themselves. The contrast did not need analysis. It was simply visible. Truth usually was when you finally stopped looking at what you wanted to see and looked at what is actually there. That evening, the mansion settled into quiet. Vera retired to her room with her phone and her plans. The household staff moved through their closing routines. Elizabeth slept, more peacefully, William thought, than she had slept in weeks. Stella sat alone in the narrow hallway outside Elizabeth's room, her back against the wall, her knees drawn up slightly. She had a small phone in her hand. The screen lit her face in the dim corridor. She dialed. It rang twice. A young man's voice answered, thin, slightly breathless, the voice of someone who spends a great deal of time horizontal. Stella. Hey. Her voice changed completely. The quiet professionalism fell away, and something warmer, more unguarded, took its place. How are you feeling today? Better, the voice said. The new medication is helping. Doctor says the levels are improving. Stella closed her eyes briefly. Good. That's good. You sound tired. I'm fine. Stella. I'm fine, James. A small, unconvincing smile in her voice. Don't worry about me. You just focus on getting better. Okay. That's your only job. A pause on the line. The bills, James began, are handled, Stella said firmly. I told you. Don't think about that. You work too hard. I work exactly as hard as I need to, she said quietly. Get some sleep. I'll call you tomorrow. She hung up. And then, in the silence of the empty corridor, Stella lowered her phone to her lap, pressed her head back against the wall, and let out a breath so heavy it seemed to carry the weight of everything she never said out loud. Her eyes glistened. She did not cry, not fully. She seemed to have made peace, long ago, with not finishing that particular action. As though tears were a luxury, she had stopped allowing herself somewhere along the way. She simply sat, breathed, and carried it alone, the way she had clearly been carrying everything alone for a very long time. William watched her through the corridor camera. He had not meant to keep the audio running on that hallway feed, but he had. And now he sat in the blue-gray dark with the sound of Stella's controlled breathing in his ears, and something was happening inside his chest that he had no comfortable framework for. He was not a man who was moved easily. He had learned young that softness was a door left open, and in his world, open doors got people killed. He had closed himself methodically, deliberately, room by room, until the only thing left was the surface that worked. But this girl who picked pills off a cold floor and called her sick brother every night and stayed because she had decided that someone who had nobody deserved at least one person. She was doing something to the architecture of walls he had spent 17 years building. He did not know what to do with that. So, he did what he always did when something exceeded his current understanding. He filed it away, watched, and waited. 3 floors above, in the east corridor, a door opened quietly. Vera stepped out of her room, phone pressed to her ear, her voice barely above a murmur. It needs to happen before the wedding, she was saying. Not after. Before. A pause as the other person responded. I don't care how, Vera said. Just make sure the old woman's condition gets worse. Naturally. Slowly. Another pause. No one will question it. She's already sick. She turned and walked back into her room. The door clicked shut. In the corridor below, Stella sat against the wall, staring at nothing, completely unaware of the conversation happening 3 floors above her head. And in the hidden passage behind the east wing, Don William sat forward slowly in his chair. His eyes had gone very still, very dark. And in a voice so quiet it was almost not a voice at all. More like a decision taking shape in the air. He said, "Enough watching." William did not move immediately. That was the discipline. Even now. Even with Vera's words still hanging in the air of the corridor like something poisonous. He sat with it. Turned it over. Let the full weight of what he had just heard settle completely before he decided what to do with it. Make sure the old woman's condition gets worse. Naturally. Slowly. His mother. Elizabeth Costello. The woman who had raised him alone in a 2-room apartment while working 3 jobs. The woman who had pressed her savings into his hands at 19 and told him to build something. The woman who had never once asked him for anything in return except that he be careful and that he be honest, and that he come home. Vera wanted to kill her. Not with violence. Not with anything traceable or loud. But with the slow, quiet cruelty of withheld medication and manufactured decline. The kind of death that looks like illness and leaves no fingerprints. William pressed his fist against his mouth. Breathed. Filed it. Then he stood up from the chair for the first time in hours, rolled his neck slowly, and made a decision. It was time to stop watching from the shadows. Not to confront. Not yet. But to move. He found Stella in the hallway outside Elizabeth's room exactly where the camera had shown her. Back against the wall, knees slightly drawn up, phone resting in her lap, eyes closed. She was not asleep. He could tell by the particular stillness of someone who is resting their body but not their mind. He stopped a few feet away. Said nothing. Stella's eyes opened. For 1 full second she simply looked at him, processing what she was seeing, running it against what she knew to be possible, finding the results impossible and yet undeniable. Then the tray in her hands hit the floor. Pills, a glass, a small folded cloth. Everything scattered across the corridor floor in almost exactly the same pattern as Elizabeth's medication had scattered earlier. Neither of them looked down at it. Stella pressed herself back against the wall. Her face drained completely of color. Don William. Quietly, he said. His voice was low, controlled. Not unkind, but carrying the particular weight of a man who does not repeat himself. Stella closed her mouth. William looked at her for a long moment. In the dim light of the corridor, without the distance of a camera screen between them, she looked younger than he had registered. And more tired. The kind of tired that sleep does not fix, that only comes from carrying something heavy for a very long time. You know something, he said. It was not a question. Stella's jaw tightened slightly. I work here, she said carefully. I observe things. It's not my place to. Stella. She stopped. Something about the way he said her name. Not sharp, not threatening, but simply direct, like a hand placed firmly on a table, made the careful sentence she had been constructing fall apart. She looked at him, and in her eyes, he saw the thing he had been watching for days now. The conflict of someone who knows the right thing and is afraid of the cost of doing it. He understood that conflict. He had lived inside it more times than he could count. Tell me, he said quietly. Everything. Stella did not speak immediately. She bent down first, slowly, and began collecting the scattered items from the floor. Not from habit, William understood, but because she needed the seconds. Needed to decide. He waited. She straightened, set the tray carefully on the small hallway table beside her, and then turned to face him fully. How long have you been here? She asked. Long enough, he said. She studied his face. Reading it the way someone reads a face, when they are trying to determine whether honesty will be safe. Whatever she found there must have been sufficient. Because she began to talk. She told him about the medication. How Vera had begun, subtly, to interfere with Elizabeth's doses, not eliminating them entirely, never anything so obvious, but delaying them, moving the tray, telling Stella that Elizabeth had already taken them when she had not. Small manipulations, individually deniable, collectively devastating for a woman whose condition required absolute consistency. She told him about the oxygen. 2 nights ago, she said, she had come into Elizabeth's room late. Later than usual, because Vera had sent her on an unnecessary errand to the far side of the mansion. When she arrived, Elizabeth's breathing had been labored in a way that was different from her normal difficulty. Stella had checked the oxygen equipment and found the flow dial turned down, not off, not obviously tampered with, just reduced enough to matter over several hours. She had corrected it quietly, said nothing, because she had no proof of who had touched it, and she was, as she said with a flatness that carried its own kind of sorrow, only the maid. She told him about the phone calls. The ones Vera made late at night in the East Corridor, keeping her voice low but not low enough. Names Stella didn't recognize, numbers discussed, timelines. She had caught fragments over weeks. Enough to understand that whatever Vera was planning was not impulsive. It was structured. It had been structured for a long time. And then she told him the thing that made William go completely still. She didn't come here by chance, Stella said. William looked at her. I heard a name, Stella continued carefully, on one of the calls. About 3 weeks ago. She paused. Corsetti. The word landed in the corridor like a stone dropped into still water. William did not react visibly, but something shifted behind his eyes, a rapid, internal recalibration. The kind that happens when a picture you thought you understood suddenly reveals itself to be something else entirely. Larger, darker, with edges you hadn't known to look for. She said the name specifically? He asked. She said. Stella hesitated, reconstructing it carefully. She said, tell Corsetti the timeline is intact. 3 weeks after the wedding, everything transfers. William turned away slightly. Not from Stella. Just away. The way a person turns when they need a moment that belongs only to them. He stood with it. Vera had not simply deceived him for personal gain. She had been positioned, placed inside his life like a blade slid slowly between the panels of armor, patient, precise, and aimed at the exact center of everything he had built. The engagement was not a relationship that had gone wrong. It was an operation. He was the target. His mother was the leverage. And his empire was the prize. He turned back to Stella. She was watching him with the careful attention of someone who understands they are standing close to something volatile and is choosing, deliberately, to remain anyway. Why didn't you come to me sooner? He asked. The question was not accusatory. It was genuine. Stella looked at him steadily. Because I was afraid, she said. Not of you. A brief pause. Of not being believed. I'm the maid, Don William. She is your fiancée. If I had come to you with fragments and suspicions, you would have had every reason to question my motives. She looked down briefly, or dismissed them entirely. William was quiet, because she was right. He knew with complete honesty that 3 days ago, before this corridor, before these screens, before watching a girl kneel on cold stone to pick up pills one by one, he would not have listened. He would have been courteous about it, but he would not have believed her. I almost didn't believe myself, he said. Stella looked up. Something passed between them in the silence. Not dramatic, not loud, but the specific recognition of two people who have both been, in different ways, standing alone with a truth nobody else was ready to receive. William looked away first. You did the right thing, he said quietly. Staying. Saying nothing until the time was right. He paused. It kept her safe. Stella said nothing, but her shoulders, which had been carrying an invisible tension since the moment she had opened her eyes and found him standing in the corridor, lowered slightly, just slightly, the way tension releases when someone finally puts down something they have been holding for too long. William moved to the door of Elizabeth's room, placed his hand lightly on the frame. Inside, through the small gap, he could see his mother sleeping, her breathing shallow but steady, her face relaxed in the particular way of someone who is finally resting after hours of quiet endurance. Stella had left a small lamp on beside the bed. Low light. Warm. The kind of light that says someone is watching over you. William looked at his mother for a long moment. Then he spoke. Quietly, without turning around. Is there anything else? He asked. Anything you haven't told me? Stella was still behind him in the corridor. A pause. One more thing, she said. He waited. The man who came today, she said carefully, in the black car. William turned slightly. I've seen him before, Stella said. Not here. Before I worked here. I grew up near the Corsetti district. She met his eyes. That man, Raphael, he used to visit my neighborhood when I was a girl. Not for good reasons. She stopped. I recognized him the moment he arrived today. And I recognized the way Miss Vera looked at him. Another pause. They have known each other for a very long time, Don William. Much longer than she has known you. The corridor was completely silent. William absorbed it. Then he straightened slowly, the way a man straightens when he has finished making a decision, and is now simply in the process of executing it. Go back to my mother, he said quietly. Stay with her tonight. Don't leave her room for any reason. Stella nodded. And Stella? She paused at the door. Whatever happens next, he said. You are safe in this house. She looked at him for a moment. Then she pushed the door open gently and slipped inside. William stood alone in the corridor. The mansion was quiet around him. Vera was 3 floors above, sleeping or planning or both. Raphael Don had returned to wherever he had come from, for now. And Don William stood in the dark hallway of his own home, in plain black clothes and a low cap, and allowed himself exactly 30 seconds of absolute stillness. Then he pulled out his phone, dialed a number that rang only once before it was answered. Marcus, he said quietly. Boss. I need everything you have on Raphael Don and his connection to anyone named Vera in the last 3 years. A pause. Everything. By morning. Done, Marcus said. No questions. No hesitation. That was why Marcus was still alive after 17 years. William ended the call. Stood for one more moment in the silence. And then, with the particular quiet of a man who has finished being patient and is now simply deciding the order of things, he said to no one in particular, in a voice that carried the full cold weight of everything Don William had ever been. We end this tomorrow. Morning came quietly to the Costello mansion. Pale light moved through the tall windows of the east wing, crossing the marble floors in long, slow rectangles. The household staff began their routines. Coffee was prepared. Curtains were drawn back. The day arranged itself around the people inside it, indifferent to what those people were carrying. Vera came downstairs at 9. She was dressed beautifully, the way she was always dressed, with the kind of effortless precision that takes considerable effort. Her hair was arranged. Her posture was flawless. The performance was fully operational before she had reached the bottom step. She stopped at the foot of the staircase and found Don William sitting at the head of the dining table, dressed in a tailored dark suit, reading the morning paper, a cup of coffee steaming at his right hand, as though he had never left. Vera's recovery was fast. William gave her that. Less than 2 seconds elapsed between the moment she saw him and the moment the warmth flooded back into her expression. The surprise dissolved into delight. Her face rearranged itself into the portrait of a woman who has just received the best possible news. She crossed the room toward him with her arms already opening. William, you're back early. I didn't hear you come in. Sit down, Vera, he said. He did not look up from the paper. Something in his voice, quiet, almost casual, carrying beneath it a specific gravity that had nothing to do with volume, stopped her 3 feet from the table. She sat, arranged herself, composed herself, reset. Is everything all right? She asked, her voice carrying exactly the right measure of concern. William turned a page of the paper. How is my mother this morning? He asked. Much the same, Vera said. Resting. I checked on her earlier. A pause. The perfect length. The doctors say rest is the most important thing right now. William nodded slowly, still reading. Did she take her medication? He asked. Of course, Vera said. William turned another page. All of it, he asked. A beat. Nearly invisible. Yes, Vera said. William set the paper down. He picked up his coffee cup, took a slow sip, set it back exactly where it had been. Then he looked at Vera for the first time since she had come downstairs, directly, unhurriedly, with the particular quality of attention that had made men far more dangerous than Vera feel the floor shift beneath them. Tell me about your week, he said. She was extraordinary. William had known that intellectually, had understood, since the corridor, that he was dealing with someone skilled. But watching it operate in real time, from the inside, knowing everything he now knew, it was almost impressive in a way that made his chest feel hollow. She was warm, detailed, specific in the way that liars learn to be specific, because vague answers invite questions, and specific answers feel like proof. She told him about her days, about visiting Elizabeth, about managing the household, about missing him, about the wedding preparations she had been quietly advancing in his absence, small, loving touches she had added, because she wanted everything to be perfect. She told him about a phone call she had made to her mother, about a walk she had taken in the garden, about a book she had started reading. Every sentence was a brick in a wall, solid, placed carefully, designed to hold weight. William listened to all of it. He asked questions, gentle, curious, the questions of a man who has been away and wants to catch up. He laughed once, briefly, at something she said. He reached across the table at one point and covered her hand with his. Vera's eyes softened, and in that softening, that small, satisfied relaxation of someone who believes they are winning, William saw everything he needed to confirm. He withdrew his hand. "I have something I want to show you," he said. "After breakfast." "Oh." Vera smiled. "What is it?" William picked up his coffee again. "A surprise," he said simply. The room William chose was the study. Dark wood, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. A large desk that had belonged to his father and his father's father before that. A room that smelled of old paper and decisions. He had chosen it deliberately. He closed the door behind them and moved to the desk without hurry. Vera stood near the center of the room, still in performance mode. Relaxed, curious, slightly playful in the way she became when she was confident. William opened the top drawer of the desk, removed a small black device, set it on the desk between them. Vera looked at it. "What is that?" she asked. "A recorder," William said. "Among other things." He pressed play, and Vera's own voice filled the study. "He's gone. Finally. Come now." The color did not drain from her face immediately. It retreated, slowly, by degrees, the way a tide pulls back from a shore. Her expression did not collapse. She was too trained for collapse. But something behind her eyes changed irrevocably, the particular change that happens when a person understands, in full, that the ground they were standing on was never solid. William let it play. "Tell Corsetti the timeline is intact. 3 weeks after the wedding, everything transfers. Make sure the old woman's condition gets worse. Naturally. Slowly." He let every word fill the room. He watched Vera the entire time. Not with anger. Not with the visible fury of a man who has been wronged and wants her to know it. With something colder and more complete than anger. With clarity. When the recording finished, the study was absolutely silent. Vera stood without moving for a long moment. Then, and this was the part that William would remember longest, she smiled. Small. Thin. "The last performance. You're a careful man," she said. "I am," William agreed. "How long?" "Since the beginning of the week," he said. "I never left for Sicily." Something moved across her face. A flash of genuine feeling beneath all the architecture. Not remorse. Something closer to the specific frustration of a person who has played a long game with precision and lost to a variable they had not accounted for. "I underestimated you," she said. "No," William said quietly. "You underestimated what I was willing to do to protect my mother." Vera's composure shifted. The smile faded. And what came up from beneath it was something raw. Not the cold calculation of the recordings, not the warm performance of breakfast, but a third thing entirely. A genuine grievance. The voice of someone who has decided that if the game is over, they will at least say what they actually think. "You want to talk about protecting people?" she said. "William, do you know what it is to be handed to someone as a strategic asset? To be told, this is your target, this is your mission, this is the man you will attach yourself to and the life you will dismantle." William said nothing. "I didn't choose this," she said, her voice rising slightly. "I was placed here. I was given a role and told to perform it. And I did. For 18 months I did everything that was asked of me, and I was very good at it." "You tried to kill my mother," William said. The words were quiet. They stopped her completely. "You delayed her medication," he continued, in the same level tone. "You reduced her oxygen. You planned, deliberately and systematically, to accelerate the death of a 70-year-old woman who had never done anything to you, because she was inconvenient." Vera said nothing. "Whatever was done to you," William said, "whatever you were told, whatever position you were placed in, you made choices. Every day you were in this house, you made choices." He paused. "Those are yours." The room held the silence. Then Vera lifted her chin. "You think you're different," she said. "You think the world you built is clean? You want to talk about choices and consequences. Let's talk about what you've done. The people you've buried. The families you've broken. I know what I've done, William said simply. It stopped her. Because it was not defensive. It was not an argument. It was just a fact, stated plainly by a man who had made his peace, or his reckoning, with who he was a long time ago. I know exactly what I am, he said. I have never pretended otherwise. He looked at her steadily. Can you say the same? Vera looked at him. For the first time since he had known her, for the first time since this whole elaborate construction had begun. He saw something genuine in her face. Not remorse. Not quite. But something adjacent to it. The shadow of a person underneath the operation. Momentarily visible. It lasted approximately 3 seconds. Then the door opened. Marcus stepped in, broad, quiet, the immovable presence that had stood at William's back for 17 years. 2 other men followed. Vera looked at them, then back at William. What happens now? She asked. That depends on how cooperative you are, William said. Starting with everything you know about Corsetti's current operation. Names, locations, plans. He paused. Everything. Vera was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed. Short. Genuine. The laugh of someone who finds the situation darkly funny for reasons only they fully understand. You know, she said, almost conversationally. For what it's worth, the first month, at least, she stopped. Shook her head slightly. It doesn't matter. No. William agreed. It doesn't. She looked at Marcus. At the men beside him. At the room around her. The dark wood, the old desk, the bookshelves full of a family history she had spent 18 months preparing to destroy. Then she looked back at William one final time. You want to know about Corsetti? She said. I want to know everything, he said. A pause. Then you should know, she said quietly, that I'm not the only one he placed. William's eyes held hers. There is someone else, she said. Someone who has been in this house far longer than I have. Someone you trust far more than you ever trusted me. She tilted her head slightly. Someone who has been reporting to Corsetti for over 2 years. The study was completely silent. William did not move. Someone, Vera said, with the last composed smile she would ever give him. Who held your mother's hand this morning and called her family. The word landed in the room like a stone through glass. William stood absolutely still. His face revealed nothing. But behind his eyes, in the part of him that was not Don William the boss, but simply William the man, something lurched. Because the image that came immediately, unbidden and vivid, was Stella. On the cold floor, picking up pills. She didn't have anyone to stay. My mother didn't have anyone to stay. He stood with it, turned it over, felt the full awful weight of the possibility. Then, with the discipline of a man who had learned, at enormous cost, never to accept a single source as the final word on anything, he filed it, and looked at Vera with eyes that gave nothing away. Take her to the East Room, he said to Marcus. William, Vera began. We'll continue this conversation shortly, he said. You'll be comfortable. You'll be unharmed. He paused. As long as what you've told me is true. Marcus moved forward. Vera went without resistance, because she was, whatever else she was, a professional, and she understood that the leverage she had just offered was her only remaining currency. The door closed behind them. William stood alone in his father's study, in the silence, with a name that would not leave his mind, and a doubt he did not want, but could not, in good conscience, ignore. William did not go to Stella immediately. He stood in the study for a long time after the door closed. Long enough for the silence to stop feeling like pressure and start feeling like space. The kind of space a man needs when he is trying to think clearly about something he does not want to think about at all. He moved to the window. Outside, the garden his mother had planted 20 years ago was catching the late morning light. The old rose beds, the stone path that curved toward the far wall, the bench where Elizabeth used to sit on good days when her legs permitted it. He stared at it without seeing it. Someone who has been in this house far longer than I have. Someone you trust far more than you ever trusted me. Someone who held your mother's hand this morning and called her family. He turned the words over carefully, the way he turned everything over, not looking for comfort, not looking for the answer he preferred, but looking for what was actually true. The problem was that he could construct the case both ways. On one side, Stella had been in the mansion for 2 years. She had access to Elizabeth's room, her medication, her daily routine. She had information about the household, about William's habits, about vulnerabilities, that would be extraordinarily valuable to an operation like Corsetti's. She had grown up near the Corsetti district by her own admission. She had recognized Raphael Don on sight. On the other side, everything he had watched for 4 days. The pills on the cold floor. The oxygen equipment quietly corrected in the middle of the night. The phone call to her brother. The tears she had cried alone in the dark. The specific texture of exhaustion that cannot be performed, that belongs only to people who have been carrying something real for a very long time. The way Elizabeth had smiled. She didn't have anyone to stay. My mother didn't have anyone to stay. William pressed 2 fingers to his mouth and stood with both sides of it. The discipline was not to choose based on what he wanted. The discipline was to find out what was true. He found Marcus in the corridor outside the East Room. Vera's cooperation? He asked. Reluctant but real. Marcus said. She's given us 2 names so far. Both consistent with what we already had on Corsetti's Eastern operation. She's not making things up. She's too smart for that. A pause. She wants protection. She's trading information for it. William nodded slowly. The claim she made at the end, he said. About someone else in the house. Did she give you a name? Marcus met his eyes. No, he said. She's holding that. Saving it. She said someone who has been here over 2 years, William said. Someone close to my mother. Marcus said nothing for a moment. Then, carefully. That description fits 3 people on the current staff. I know who it fits, William said. Marcus waited. I need you to pull the financial records for the household staff, William said. Quietly. All incomings and outgoings for the last 2 years. Flag anything that doesn't match salary. How quickly? An hour, William said. Marcus nodded and moved. William went to his mother first. He knocked. A habit that Elizabeth had instilled in him at age 7 and that had survived every subsequent version of who he had become. And pushed the door open gently. Elizabeth was sitting up against her pillows, more alert than he had seen her in weeks. The color in her face was still fragile, still the particular pallor of long illness, but her eyes were clear and focused. Stella was not in the room. William registered the absence, without showing it. He crossed to the chair beside the bed. Stella's chair, he realized, and sat down. Elizabeth looked at him for a long moment. You stayed, she said. Not a question. I stayed, he confirmed. She studied his face with the particular accuracy of a mother who has spent decades reading a child who learned very young to show nothing. What did you find? She asked. Everything you were afraid I would, he said quietly. Elizabeth closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, there was sorrow in them, but not surprise. The sorrow of someone who had known a difficult thing for a long time and had simply been waiting for the people around them to catch up. Vera, she said. Yes. And more than Vera, she said. It was not quite a question. William looked at his mother. Someone told me, he said carefully, that there may be another person in this house. Someone close to you. Someone who has been, he stopped. Chose the word precisely. Reporting. Elizabeth was quiet. William watched her face. And what he saw there was not what he expected. It was not alarm. It was not confirmation. It was something that looked very much like grief, but aimed. He gradually realized, not at the possibility William was raising. Aimed at him. At the fact that he was raising it. William, she said slowly. I have to ask, he said. I know you do, she said. You are who you are. A pause. But I want you to listen to me before you do anything. Can you do that? He nodded. Elizabeth folded her hands in her lap. That girl, she said, has been in this room almost every day for 2 years. She has read to me when I couldn't sleep. She has sat with me through the nights when the pain was bad enough that I didn't want to be alone but too proud to call you. Her voice was steady and unhurried. She has never once asked me for anything. Never positioned herself. Never tried to learn things she had no business knowing. Elizabeth looked at her son directly. I have lived 70 years, William. I know what it looks like when someone is using you. And I know what it looks like when someone simply, she stopped, cares. William said nothing. Whatever you were told, Elizabeth said quietly, be careful. Be very careful. Because the person who told you. Ask yourself what they had to gain from putting doubt in your mind about the one person in this house who has genuinely protected me. The room was quiet. William sat with it. He thought about timing, about the sequence, about the moment Vera had chosen to deliver that final piece of information. Not at the beginning of the conversation, not in the middle, but at the very end. After everything else. After she had run out of other currency. He thought about what Marcus had said. She's holding that. Saving it. He stood up slowly. Kissed his mother once, lightly, on the top of her head. Rest, he said. He went to find Stella. She was in the small room at the back of the house where the staff kept their things, a narrow, functional space that smelled of clean linen and something faintly floral. She was folding towels at the small table near the window with the focused attention she brought to everything, as though the quality of the fold genuinely mattered. She heard him come in and turned. When she saw his face, something in his expression that was not quite the same as any version of him she had seen before. She set the towel down slowly. Sit down, he said. She sat. William remained standing. Not looming, just standing. The way he stood when he was thinking through something rather than performing authority. I need to ask you something, he said. And I need you to answer me honestly. Not carefully. Not protectively. Honestly. Stella looked at him without looking away. All right, she said. Do you have any connection, he said, to the Corsetti organization? Any contact, past or present, with anyone affiliated with them? Any arrangement, any communication, any? No, she said. Flat. Immediate. No construction around it. William looked at her. Vera told me, he said, that someone in this house has been reporting to Corsetti for over 2 years. Someone close to my mother. She implied it was you. Stella was very still. Something moved across her face. Not guilt, but something he needed a moment to identify. It was recognition. The specific recognition of someone who has just understood a move that was made against them. She implied it was me. Stella said slowly. Yes. Stella looked down at her hands on the table. A long pause. When she looked up again, her eyes were clear and direct. Don William, she said. I grew up near the Corsetti district. That is true. I told you that myself. My brother James has kidney failure. I work here because this position pays enough to cover his treatment. That is the entirety of my connection to anything you are asking about. She paused. I have never spoken to anyone from that organization. I have never been approached. I have never passed information to anyone outside this house about anything. William studied her face. 2 years ago, he said, when you took this position. How did you find it? Through an agency, she said. Standard placement. I have the documentation if you need it. I'll need it, he said. I'll get it, she said. Without defensiveness. Without offense. The simple practical response of someone who has nothing to hide and understands that proof is not an insult. It is just proof. William nodded once. Then, he pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. This was new. It registered in Stella's face. The slight adjustment of someone recalibrating the nature of a conversation. Marcus is pulling financial records for the entire staff, William said. 2 years of incomings and outgoings. If there is any payment, any amount, any account, that doesn't match salary, it will appear. It won't appear in mine, Stella said. I believe you, he said. Stella blinked. It was a small reaction. But it was real. The involuntary response of someone who had not been expecting those 3 words from this man in this context. Then why? She began. Because believing you and verifying you are not the same thing, he said. And in my world, the difference between those 2 things has cost people everything. He paused. I'm not verifying because I doubt you. I'm verifying because you deserve to be cleared completely. Not half cleared. Not probably fine. Completely. Stella looked at him for a long moment. Something shifted in her expression. Not dramatically, not with any performance. Just a quiet, almost imperceptible softening. The particular softening of someone who has been defended rather than suspected, and is not entirely sure how to receive it. All right, she said quietly. Marcus returned in 40 minutes. He set a single printed sheet on the desk in front of William. The financial summary, flagged entries highlighted in red. William looked at it. One name was highlighted. Not Stella. The head of household. A man named Bertram who had managed the Costello Mansion's operations for 3 years and had, over the course of 26 months, received 11 separate deposits from an untraceable account totaling nearly 4 times his annual salary. Bertram, who managed staff schedules, who controlled access to rooms, who had, William realized, moving backward through the past week with cold precision, been the person who had opened the gate for Raphael Dawn's car without being asked, who had positioned Vera in this house 2 years ago when the previous housekeeper retired unexpectedly, who had been invisible, precisely because he was supposed to be. William sat with it for a moment. Then he looked up at Marcus. "Bertram," he said. "Bertram," Marcus confirmed. William nodded once. "Quietly," he said. "No disruption to the house. I want him contained before dinner." "Done," Marcus said. He left. William sat alone at the desk. He thought about Vera's final play, the deliberate misdirection, the finger pointed at Stella in the last moment of the last conversation. He thought about how close it had come to working, how the doubt had moved through him with a speed and conviction that had surprised even him. He thought about his mother's voice. "Ask yourself what they had to gain from putting doubt in your mind about the one person in this house who has genuinely protected me." He thought about a girl folding towels in a back room. "It won't appear in mine. Not, I promise. Not, you have to trust me." Just the plain, steady confidence of someone who already knows what the evidence will show. That evening, William walked through the garden. The light was going, that particular late afternoon quality that made the rose beds look like something from a painting, all amber and shadow, and the specific melancholy of a beautiful day ending. Stella was on the stone path. She had a small basket and was cutting a few late roses for Elizabeth's room. William understood. The way he was beginning to understand things about her that he had simply never looked at before. She heard him approach and straightened. They stood for a moment in the fading light. "Bertram," he said. Stella absorbed this. Nodded slowly. "Vera needed someone on the inside who predated her," she said. "Someone structural. Someone no one would look at." "Yes," William said. A pause. "It's over then," Stella said. Not triumphantly. Just, quietly. The way a person says something is over when it has cost enough that there is nothing celebratory in its ending. "The main operation, yes," William said. "Corsetti will respond. There is still work ahead." He paused. "But the immediate threat to this house, to my mother, is over." Stella looked down at the roses in her basket. "She'll be relieved," she said. "She will," he agreed. He looked at her for a moment. This woman who had carried the weight of a truth nobody had asked her to carry, who had stayed when leaving would have been entirely reasonable, who had picked pills off a cold floor in the dark because it was simply the right thing to do, and she was, at her core, someone who did the right thing regardless of the cost. "You passed a test," he said, "that you never knew you were taking." Stella looked up at him. "What test?" she said. William was quiet for a moment. "The kind that can't be designed," he said. "The kind that only happens when no one is watching and everything is genuinely at stake." He paused. "The kind that shows exactly who someone is." Stella looked at him steadily. "I wasn't trying to pass anything," she said. "I was just trying to make sure she was all right." "I know," William said. And in the amber light of the garden, with the roses his mother had planted 20 years ago leaning gently in the evening air around them, something in Don William's face changed. Not dramatically. Not in any way that would have been visible from a distance. But close up, it was unmistakable. The cold surface, the careful, constructed distance that 17 years of building an empire in the dark had deposited over the man underneath, shifted. Just slightly. Just enough. The way ice shifts at the very first suggestion of spring. Not melting. Not gone. But changed. Irrevocably, quietly, changed. "Thank you," he said. Stella said nothing, but she held his gaze. And in that silence, in the garden, in the fading light, with everything that had happened in the past week lying between them like ground that had been broken open and would now, slowly, have to be rebuilt, Don William understood something he had not understood when the week began. He had entered the shadows of his own house to find the truth about one woman. He had found it, but he had also found something he had not been looking for. Something he had no name for yet. Something that felt, cautiously, and against every instinct he had cultivated for 17 years, like the beginning of something real. 3 weeks later, the house felt different, quieter, ordered in a way that had nothing to do with control and everything to do with the particular peace that settles over a place when the people inside it are no longer performing anything. Vera was gone. Her cooperation traded for a relocation so far from New York that her name would not surface in anything connected to William for a very long time. Bertram was gone. Raphael Dawn was currently the subject of an investigation that Marcus had orchestrated with a kind of quiet thoroughness that left no visible fingerprints. Corsetti himself had received a communication, delivered through channels that were impossible to trace and impossible to misunderstand, that the operation inside the Costello mansion was finished, that its architect was compromised, and that any further movement against William's family would be received as a declaration of war. There had been silence from that direction since. Elizabeth was improving, slowly, because illness that has been deliberately worsened does not reverse quickly, but genuinely. Her color was better. Her appetite had returned in small degrees. She sat in the garden on good days, on the stone bench by the rose beds, with her face tipped toward whatever warmth the season offered. Stella sat with her, not always talking, sometimes just present, reading, or simply sitting, in the companionable quiet of two people who have been through something together and no longer need words to fill the space between them. One evening William stood at the window of the study and watched them in the garden below. His mother, and the woman who had stayed. He thought about what it had taken, how close the elaborate machinery of deception had come to succeeding, how many layers it had required, how many months of patience and precision had gone into something designed to hollow out everything he had built from the inside. He thought about how it had been stopped, not by his power, not by his network or his resources, or his 17 years of accumulated leverage, but by a girl in a simple uniform who had knelt on a cold floor to pick up scattered pills in the dark, because someone needed them, and she was there, and it was the right thing to do. He left the study, walked through the house, stepped out into the garden. The evening air was cool and carried the faint sweetness of the late roses. Elizabeth looked up when she heard him and smiled, a real smile, unhurried, the kind his mother had always reserved for moments when she felt genuinely safe. Stella looked up too. There was something different in how she looked at him now, not cautious in the old way, not the careful guardedness of a staff member navigating proximity to power. Something more direct, more even. The look of someone who has seen a person clearly, at their most unguarded, in the worst and most revealing circumstances, and has not looked away. William sat down on the bench beside his mother. For a while, the three of them simply sat together in the garden as the light faded. No performance, no agenda, no one watching from the shadows. Just three people in the last of the evening light, in a garden that had survived winter before and would survive it again. After a long while, Elizabeth took Stella's hand on one side and William's on the other. She said nothing. She did not need to. And William, the most feared man in the city, the man who had built an empire on silence and distance and the deliberate suppression of everything soft, sat in his mother's garden with the evening coming down around them. And for the first time in a very long time, he did not feel alone.